So hi everybody, it's Sharon here from Climate Action North, and we are delighted to bring you our next episode of Let's Talk Nature and Climate. And today it's actually the first day of Fairtrade Fortnight. So I am delighted to welcome our two guests today, which are Katharine and Maureen Rigg. Now, Katharine is a community member pioneer with the Co-op, and Maureen Rigg is the chair of the Stockton Borough Fairtrade Partnership. So good afternoon, ladies. How are you both?
Good afternoon, Sharon, and thanks for inviting us.
Yes, good afternoon.
All the better for a bit of sunshine.
Exactly. It's a good day today. It's a good day to start Fairtrade Fortnight, isn't it? So ladies, like I say, it's Fairtrade Fortnight starts today, and you know, as Climate Action North, it's something we are very aware of, I suppose. But from the climate change perspective, I see that the focus on fair trade this year is all about, you know, choose the world you want, and it's also talking about climate change and the issues around growing food and supplying food and all of the ethical side, I suppose, of fair trade as well. So it'd be nice for our listeners and our watchers today to find out a little bit about what your roles are. So Katharine, if I can start with your role as a community member pioneer for the Co-op. Can you just tell me a little bit about what that means?
Exactly, Sharon. Good afternoon, everyone. So as a community member pioneer with the Co-op, we basically act as a connector, a catalyst and a communicator between the Co-op food stores, our funeral care homes and the community. We want to basically build stronger and more resilient communities by offering fairer access to food, fairer access to mental wellbeing services and fairer access to education and employment for young people. So we do this through our local community fund. Each store has a number of causes which our members vote for and donate their member rewards to as well. So that's how we help in our communities.
And I know that's really important because I am a Co-op card member. So obviously I can remember, well, every time I go in, when I remember to take my card, obviously, it's about getting those points, isn't it? And making that little bit of a difference as well. So it's a fantastic store, I suppose, in terms of, and an organisation that's been around forever. I mean, everybody, as you know, has remembered the Co-op. It's been around for a lot of years. So I think that's a really good, it's a really good role to have as well, isn't it, Katharine? I suppose being in that sort of membership pioneer role as well.
Yeah, I find it really interesting. It's such a pleasure to kind of connect with all the groups in the community, and also I'm a part of the Stockton Fairtrade Partnership as well, so I get involved in quite a number of things across the town of Stockton. So yeah, it's great way to link in business and charities as well.
Yeah, brilliant. And that brings me to you then, Maureen. So talking about the Stockton Borough Fairtrade Partnership, which is what you're the chair of. So tell me a little bit about your role there with the partnership.
The partnership started as the steering group, which any town, borough, village, whatever, that wants to achieve a fair trade status needs a steering group to get it there. And the steering group is made up of members of the community, businesses, etc. So I was initially a member of that. And when we reached the point where the Fairtrade Foundation said, yep, you've achieved all the goals that you need to call yourselves a Fairtrade borough. The then chair stepped aside and said, right, we need somebody else to take over. So that was me, and I've been doing it ever since. So we try to promote fair trade within the borough. We work quite closely with Stockton Council because obviously they are arguably perhaps the most important single group in the borough, and they have a lot of influence on all sorts of fields. So we try to make sure that they remember to have fair trade embedded in their procurement, etc. And they do things like tonight they're changing the colours of the town centre lights to blue and green to celebrate the start of Fairtrade Fortnight, which is always a really pretty, won't be seen by quite so many people at the moment, unfortunately, because of lockdown, but there you go. We usually would have at least one fairly big event in the borough to celebrate Fairtrade Fortnight. So 2 years ago, we worked across the Tees Valley, actually, and we had a giant chocolate bar made by the young people at Catcut Academy in Hartlepool, which was carried across Stockton from, well, it started its life in Hartlepool, it travelled by bus to Stockton, it was carried by foot along the riverside path towards Middlesbrough, where it was picked up by bike and taken into Middlesbrough town centre. And the thinking behind those methods of transport was the cocoa farmers in Ghana, who walk pretty well everywhere, but used some of their Fairtrade premium many years ago to buy bikes, so that when people were working on the trees that were furthest from them, they could cycle there and therefore spend more time with the trees and therefore more time with their families at the end of the day. And then they saved up their premium and they bought a bus, because going to weddings and funerals is very important, like it is here in the Northeast, you know, community spirit. But if you have to walk all the way to the next town to the wedding and then walk all the way back, you lose 3 or 4 days from your work. If you have a bus to take you, you only lose a day. And so that's the kind of human story that to me makes such a difference with fair trade. Anybody can give a bit of help to a producer to buy some new trees or to put pretty packaging on or whatever it is. But those things where the community decides, actually, you know what, this is what we need and we're going to buy it. And it doesn't matter what you think, this is our need and we're fulfilling it. And, you know, these are the sorts of things we want to bring home to people, because I think it makes it a lot easier to pay the extra few pence for something if you feel that you know who it's helping. And it's not going to the big businessman or some faceless bureaucrat or whatever people are worried about. It's going to real live people. So that's us.
And I think that's important though, isn't it, Maureen? I think it's about bringing that human story to it, because I think you can only relate to that if you see that, if you know it's real. And I think that's what we've lost sight of, I think, sometimes, about the convenience of food. We've just become a society, I think, that it's just convenient for us to have food in all of its different ways without thinking about what's actually behind the manufacture of that food and how it's produced and the ethics behind it. I think there's something to be said about you know, buying and consuming stuff ethically as well, isn't there? There's a big sort of a big bonus, I suppose, if you understand. I mean, everyone likes that, the whole organic sort of, you know, knowing where your food comes from as well. I think everyone quite likes that, but there is that small barrier about cost as well, which we talked about earlier, I think, about, you know, the cost of things. But I think, as you say, if it's only a few pence more or 10 pence more to buy something, and you understand where it's come from and you are making a difference by buying that particular product, I think that's got to be something quite sort of, you know, quite morally good for us. Ladies, have you any slides that you would like to show us, or any pictures or photographs? If please do share your screen if you'd like to share anything with us first, and we'll have some questions after that.
The climate crisis is an immediate and ever-increasing threat, and those in climate vulnerable countries are already seeing its impact, from droughts and crop disease to floods, heat waves, and shrinking harvests. With the emergence of the global COVID pandemic, the challenges that farmers face now are bigger than ever before, with falling commodity prices and widespread shocks reverberating along our global supply chains. Ongoing poverty in farming communities makes it increasingly hard to cope with the effects of climate change. Farmers are also on the front line of the climate crisis, and many still can't afford basic human rights like sending their children to school or putting food on their plates. But fair trade ensures farmers receive fairer prices so they can improve their livelihoods and are better able to face climate challenges and protect the environment around them.
Fair trade means fair for people and planet. It means a fairer deal for farmers and workers on the front line of the climate crisis, to help them deal with the huge challenges climate change is already causing them. Challenges like less fertile land, failing harvests, and more extreme weather. It means our eco-friendly fair trade standards. And it means expert advice on sustainable farming techniques from our fair trade producer networks, who offer support all around the world. But why does fair trade care about the climate crisis? Because the climate crisis isn't fair. Farmers like Siddy and his family contribute least to this crisis. Carbon emissions per person in the UK are 28 times bigger than those of someone in Sierra Leone, but they are the ones getting hit the hardest. And unless we take urgent action, things will get worse for hard-pressed communities around the world and for the future of our favourite products. Up to 50% of land used for coffee could be unusable by 2050. Plant diseases are becoming more common. Cocoa trees will be harder to grow in West Africa. Wine production could reduce by 40 to 50% in South Africa and Chile. But we can choose a better future with fair trade. Fair trade exists precisely to help those in need get through a crisis and win justice in the longer term. Whether that's a trade crisis of unsustainable prices, the COVID-19 crisis, or the huge challenge of the climate crisis. So how is fair trade helping tackle the climate crisis? When you buy fair trade, it means farmers and workers getting at least a guaranteed fair trade minimum price and an extra payment known as the fair trade premium, which they choose how to invest in their communities and farms. That means more resources to deal with the escalating challenges climate change brings. This could mean planting new trees, new climate-smart farming techniques, or coping with more extreme weather patterns. Sadly, too many farmers and workers simply don't earn enough to do any of this, which is why our global fair trade movement is campaigning for all farmers and workers to earn a living income, so communities, businesses and families in the global south can survive this crisis. But with our fair trade producer networks, fair trade is there on the ground too, giving expert practical advice. Fair trade farmers are on the front line of the climate crisis, but are working to win a better future for our planet. They work in line with our eco-friendly fair trade standards, bans on deforestation, commitments to reduce carbon footprints, protections for biodiversity. So every time you choose fair trade, you're choosing a better future for all of us and the whole planet. Action on climate change is in our hands. Share to help us win a fairer future.
These are the school bags, which the premium on some fair trade raisins bought for the children of the area, because they were carrying their books to and from school, having used part of the premium to pay school fees. They were carrying their books to and from school in carrier bags, and of course they got wet in really heavy rain. So then they were forbidden to bring the books home because they'd been damaged. So buying school bags meant that they could continue to go to school safely and you know, enjoy their school times. So absolutely brilliant what people decide to do. I don't know if you want, I mean, I can go on and on about producers. This one's a lovely one, which I met this dear lady. Her name is Tempe, and she grows rooibos tea for the fair trade market, which is quite a niche. I mean, rooibos tea is quite a niche market anyway. It's not a tea per se, it's a red bush that grows on a particular plateau in South Africa. And they used part of their fair trade premium to buy false teeth for the older adults, because in that area, meat is a very high proportion of the diet. And if you haven't got teeth that will cope with it, then you end up with malnutrition. And people can't afford always to go to the dentist themselves. So using the fair trade premium, 2 pensioners a year go and get their teeth seen to at the nearby city and have false teeth. And Tempe was so proud of them because she could now smile again. Yeah, to me, that's it's big. It's the sort of thing that really matters, really makes a difference. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a wonderful story. And I think it's just, again, it's things we take for granted though, don't we? We take for granted in our society. And we should be more mindful of that, really, of how these things really help different countries get to the level that they need to be, that we just already have. We're already there. We take it all for granted. Yeah, wonderful photographs as well. It's really, really nice to see that.
Share one more with you at the moment, and then I'm sure that Katharine has things to say. But this lady, young woman, was one of the first students. Those computers were provided by the Fairtrade premium on wine sold by another supermarket, let's say. And that girl was one of the first pupils to learn how to use a computer. And she then went off to college in the city, and she's now back being the tutor to the next generation of youngsters there. And, you know, it's empowered her as a girl growing up in quite a masculine dominated society. There she is with a skill that she can pass on, and she does a night class and an evening class for the men after they've finished in the vineyard, so that they can learn too.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely lovely. Really, really good. It must feel very, very, very satisfying and very rewarding, I suppose, when you see those projects come to fruition, and you know that making a real difference.
It's making a huge difference. It's also, it makes me very conscious that it's for a relatively small number of producers, because if you look at, even in a shop like the Co-op that sells a good stock of fair trade, a good range of fair trade stuff, but you look at the proportion of the shelves that has fair trade things and the proportion that has non-fair trade, and you get an idea of how many people are not benefiting. And the life of the people who are selling at fair trade prices is not easy. They still struggle financially. So the ones who are not getting that bit of extra must be in really dire straits, I think.
So I think the question I was going to ask about the coffee as well is it seems like an easy choice, doesn't it, to make, because there's so much like Cafe Direct and so many different brands of coffee now. think the whole sort of concept of fair trade, which we will come to a bit later, I'd like to come back to you about that, Maureen, but I think for the moment we'll pop across to Katharine. Katharine, I have a question for you about bananas, because I think thinking about fair trade and how people relate to fair trade products, I mean, I can guarantee that the majority of people think about coffee and tea. They might think about the bananas because they see the fair trade emblem, you know, when you pick them up, especially in the co-op and places like that, you see the fair trade. So I think my question is about bananas. A customer going into a shop and buying a fair trade banana, what does that mean for the co-op and the fair trade?
Yeah, definitely. Bananas is a really easy way, because a lot of supermarkets now do stock fair trade bananas. But I'll just tell us a little story, perhaps from the Dominican Republic, related to bananas and climate change, since that's our theme. So as part of Co-op's commitment to ensure that fair trade producers benefit whenever a banana is used as an ingredient in Co-op own label products, Co-op funded the Productivity Increase Programme in Dominican Republic in 2018. And this project shares technologies and knowledge with producers to mitigate risks of lower productivity and demand due to the climate crisis. So as a result, producers saw an increase in their productivity from 2018, which has also improved producer conditions in a number of ways. And Marek de Pena, the director and co-founder of a small producer organization called Belino Cooperative, has told us this. So we asked her, what's the impact of climate change on banana production? And she replied that the Dominican Republic is highly impacted by climate change. The island is frequently hit by hurricanes and tropical storms. The combination of wind and heavy rains and subsequent flooding causes high damage to the crops and result in financial loss to the farmers. Also, extensive periods of drought affect the banana production, as water is scarce and prioritized for human consumption. So we also went on to ask, how does the act of a co-op customer buying a fair trade banana support lives of the producers? So the answer was, when a customer buys a fair trade banana, they demonstrate a commitment to human dignity, fairness, and sustainability for current and future generations of farmers. So thanks to commitments from businesses like Co-op, farmers have invested in climate-friendly technologies and the responsible management of natural resources. And the fair trade premium from these bananas in this cooperative here has enabled children to go to school, including those with special needs. Health services are now accessible, even in the most remote areas. Investments have also been made in housing and community services. And Belino and fair trade benefits reach over 30 rural communities, 12,000 patients, 1,000 school children, and 100 university scholarships. And that's just one fair trade community. Isn't that fantastic?
It is. And can you just imagine if that was rolled out globally and it was just repeated, and you know what I mean, as an initiative, it would just be amazing, wouldn't it? And I just think it just seems so easy to do. So why aren't we doing more, you know, more of that? I know it's going to be a sort of a difficult question, but you know, I think that brings us back to the whole fair trade awareness. You know, I think that we need to raise more awareness of the impact, you know, good fair trade business is having on not only these families, but the climate crisis in general. I read some, I think it was from the fair trade as well, that there are fair trade climate change adaptation plans being laid out globally as well, which is just incredible really, because that's just such an important aspect of the food growing industry. You know, it's same with, we have pollinators, we have the problems with pollination, but we also have a huge problem with the, you know, the global climate crisis in terms of, you know, all of those conditions that they have to adapt to as growers and farmers as well. So yeah, I like that. I mean, I like the whole sort of commitment, I suppose, Katharine, around the, you know, the banana growing industry and how it's helping, how fair trade is actually helping to manage that. Yeah, and I suppose the other question I'll ask you while you're here as well is about the coffee. And I think what we're trying to do with yourselves as well, so I should mention that, you know, we've entered into this partnership collaboration, haven't we, for Fairtrade Fortnight. Is about raising awareness of all of the things that we do daily on a daily basis about climate change and the climate crisis, but linking it to your role as co-op ambassador and member pioneer, and also Maureen's role as a local group, you know, as an organisation that we are able to work with because we're local. I just think it's a really good idea that we can collaborate on these things and get that message out there to tell people what's not only happening on the ground, but how it is impacting people's livelihoods. So really, the simplest thing that we were saying we were going to raise awareness of is how simple it is to make that one switch. We talk about one small change a lot in Climate Action North, about making one small change for fair trade even. And it's usually going to be round about either bananas, which I said, or it's usually going to be for businesses. It's usually around tea and coffee, isn't it?
Good question, Sharon. Definitely. I mean, it's as consumers now, it's so easy, you know, for all of us to have access to fair trade, irrespective of where you shop. You know, so many supermarkets and businesses now are stocking fair trade. You just have to look out for the fair trade mark. And obviously today I'm just giving you the co-op perspective, but there's many other businesses out there that have been supporting fair trade for a number of years. So around coffee, just to give you a little example of that, Co-op were the first to start selling ethically traded Cafe Direct coffee, which is one of the world's first fair trade products. And in 2020, the Co-op funded an East African youth engagement project at Mutira Farms Cooperative Society in Kenya, as part of Fairtrade's Africa's wider approach to engage more young people in coffee farming and to tackle the effects of climate change. So in Mutira Co-op, there are 9,786 members, of which just 675 young people. So you can see the future of coffee in that area didn't look too good, did it? They needed to get a lot more younger people engaged in growing coffee. So that's what the projects was going to do, was to engage more young people in coffee farming, was also to train farmers in environmentally friendly agricultural practices and provide them with climate resilient bean varieties to protect yields and mitigate climate risk. Because as we all know, we love drinking our cup of coffee, but if the climate change continues around the world like this, we may not be able to afford our cup of coffee every morning because farmers may not be able to produce it, or there may not be young people trained up to do it, or the land may not be good to grow it anymore. So we have to think about that now, and by training up the next generation with these agricultural practices, you know, we are sustaining this into the future. So it's really important.
Thank you. Yeah, it really is. And I just think from a business perspective, I think, you know, it's such an easy swap, isn't it, to make that transition from standard coffee to fair trade coffee. And like you say, it's probably not that much more expensive either, I don't think so. But I think it's a really good point of there are simple changes that, you know, businesses can make, or, you know, in our own society we can make to just switch across to fair trade. And I think what we'll be doing is as a group, I think for the next 2 weeks, I think we'll be raising awareness of what kind of things people can do. So Maureen, just coming back to fair trade in general, I can remember something about fair trade originating in the Northeast, or being very prevalent in the Northeast at one point, wasn't it? I think, is that right, that fair trade originated here in the Northeast?
No, not completely originated. It sort of sprung, the idea of it, certainly in the UK, came about initially, I think, in Durham, and then Tradecraft, which is a local fair trade company, sprung up started up in Newcastle. It's now well established in Gateshead. So it is very much a northeast baby in the UK. Holland was the other place where it was starting up at around the same sort of time. And, you know, it's gone from strength to strength. Tradecraft worked with other people to set up the Fairtrade Foundation, which sets the standards for the different products that can be certified. And that takes sometimes years of negotiation. If people think, oh, it would be a good idea to have, you know, fair trade, whatever, well, what exactly does that mean? Because it's, excuse me, it's more than just paying a fair price for something. There are criteria around how the local work is done, not exploiting children or either gender, you know, that people have an equal say, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's very much, there's a lot goes on in the background, like Katharine was saying about the work that's going on there in East Africa to try to stabilise the coffee crop for another few decades or centuries even. And it's the same with other companies who are heavily committed, are doing similar work in other countries, because as climate changes, as we know in our own gardens, some things don't grow so well, and suddenly something that didn't grow at all sprouts away and, you know, is wonderful. And there's a lot of work to be done with the communities to make sure that they're getting the best crops they can for the soil and the climate that they've got, rather than still trying to fight with the soil, the climate they used to have 10, 20 years ago. You know, and that's really important.
Yeah, so I suppose that brings us back to the adaptation plans as well, you know, that they're looking at about, you know, we do a lot of work on Climate Action North about, we're interested in soil. Obviously, it's a massive sort of resource that we possibly underrate and undervalue, I think. But, you know, the condition of soil is incredibly important for anything, for any ecosystem, really. So I think we just have to be mindful of all of that, don't we, in the food production side as well. So we just have to think about, you know, how would that soil adapt in the changing climate? And as you've said, what kind of things that may have grown there in the past may not any longer be viable for that option. So I think it's fascinating, really, isn't it, that the amount of stuff that needs to happen, I suppose, to make sure that fair trade becomes more of an important issue that we look at on an everyday basis. We should be doing that anyway, really. Ethically, it's the right thing to do, isn't it, really? So I've got another question, I suppose, for Katharine, is here at Climate Action North, we do a lot of work around the UN Sustainable Development Goals as well. You know, we're very keen to link all of our projects that we do to UN SDGs. We've got life on land, life below water, we've got climate action and stuff. So we're always thinking about ways of linking back to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I know that with the co-op as well, and obviously the projects, the areas that they're working in, I saw they've got quite a list actually of UN SDGs that you're sort of addressing by just being part of that whole organisation. Isn't that right? It's quite a list, isn't it?
Yes, that's right, Sharon. There's definitely an important connection between the UN Global Goals for Sustainable Development and fair trade. Fair trade, and more widely ethical consumption, links to many of the global goals. For example, SDG 1, which is no poverty, SDG 8, good jobs and economic growth, SDG 10, which is reduced inequalities, and also SDG 12, responsible consumption, and finally SDG 15, life on land. So tackling climate change has long been one of the co-op's priorities. And we've also signed the UN Global Compact, We Mean Business Coalition, which I'm sure some of your viewers are aware of anyway. And Steve Murrells, Co-op CEO, spoke in November 2020 at the UN Race to Zero event to celebrate the launch of the British Retail Consortium's Climate Action Roadmap. And this roadmap is a world first and reflects the collaborative ambition of the UK retail sector to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2040. And the Climate Action Roadmap sets out 5 areas of action. And again, Fairtrade fits into many of these. So number 1 is putting decarbonisation at the core of all business decision making. Secondly, reducing carbon emissions from shops and distribution centres. 3, moving to net zero logistics operations. 4, increasing sustainably sourced products. And 5, helping customers and employers to live low carbon lifestyles. So I can see all of these kind of go hand in hand. This roadmap is going to very much support the SDGs and support other climate change initiatives that the UN and other organisations are bringing in, which again is a win-win for the environment, but also for fair trade as well. So it's a very good initiative.
It really is. And we're very, very, very interested in that as well. And I think what we'll be doing is raising awareness of that link in the next 2 weeks as well as part of Fairtrade Fortnight. Because I think lots of people probably don't realise that, Katharine and Maureen, to be honest, they don't realise that how much work is going on in the background with regard to, you know, fair trade linking to climate action, climate emergency, even though it's sort of really impactful, I suppose. It is going to have an impact in the future of food production and for farming as well. So yeah, it's really interesting to see how much is going on, really. It's very exciting, isn't it, to be working together on Fairtrade Fortnight stuff.
El café lo hemos cultivado desde hace más de 100 años y lo seguiremos cultivando quizá unos 100 años más, porque prácticamente el café es nuestra vida, ¿no? Cuando vino la roya, que era una enfermedad casi que se desconocía, sí nos dio duro, ¿no? Una muy buena producción y que quedar casi sin nada.
Muchas dificultades porque el café está muy barato. Cuando no alcanza para comprar, a veces uno se siente así un poco que no hay de dónde sacar, pues a veces.
El precio del café está bajísimo, ¿no? Con el precio de Fairtrade, de alguna manera se puede seguir cultivando el café.
Gracias a ese cultivo de café han logrado darle educación a sus hijos, y ahora que sus hijos de sus hijos también sean profesionales.
Están siguiendo el mismo camino y yo quiero que, por ejemplo, mis fincas sigan, digamos, cuando muera, dirigidas por ellos, ¿no? Realmente soy un convencido Fairtrade por haber estado involucrado desde su comienzo y tan orgulloso hasta ahorita que va a cumplir 25 años de una lucha misionera para beneficio de los productores.
Just to say, yeah, Fairtrade isn't only about food. We've talked quite a lot about food this session, and rightly, because that's what we see in the shops And that's what has the impact on the climate, particularly. But there's also Fairtrade Gold, which is something that we don't all buy every day, but when we do, gold is very often mined by exploiting children. And Fairtrade Gold solves that problem. No children exploited in the production of Fairtrade Gold. And although we might think we don't have anything with gold, what people don't realise often is that gold is used in a lot of electronics. So our mobile phones, etc., all have a bit of gold in them. And if it's not fair trade gold, which sadly it isn't, the chances are that people have been exploited. There are fair trade crafts, although they don't carry the fair trade mark, because crafts are so individual that it's impossible to come up with a set of criteria for each individual craft. So there are criteria around not exploiting your workforce, etc. And then they are all just sort of collectively sold as fairly produced crafts. They're worth looking out for, particularly when you want presents for people that are slightly different, you know. You know, as Katharine said, the climate change issues are just so important now and becoming so urgent. Fair trade food is grown as sustainably as possible, which means that quite a lot of it's organic. And if it isn't, it's grown with minimal chemicals. It just, you know, not quite none. And that's really important. That's a way of helping to keep the soil good and fertile. It's a way of helping to keep the workers healthy, because one of the things that sort of took me to swearing to myself that I would never eat another banana unless it was fair trade was seeing farmers who'd been sprayed with pesticide when the planes went over the plantation spraying the crops, and the farmers hadn't been warned to stay away. And, you know, who would deliberately buy a banana knowing that had happened? Of course we don't, but, you know, with fair trade, you're guaranteed it doesn't. So sustainability, fairness, they're the core things, and empowering people to make their own decisions for their own future and to have the world that they want to have, not the world that we think they should have. So thanks very much, Sharon, for doing this with us. And we hope it'll be the start of more and more collaborations, because I just think we're so on the same wavelength.
Yeah, we certainly are. And that exactly brings me to the new sort of hashtag with Fairtrade Fortnight, which was choose the world you want. So we all have the power to make a choice, I suppose, and we can control certain things. We may not be able to control everything, but I think the message, I suppose, that people can take from today's talk is, you know, do choose the world that you want. Please try and choose fair trade and think about where your products are coming from and what kind of processes are going on in the background. And also, you know, think about the impact on the changing climate on these issues, like, you know, crop spraying and precious metals as well. I never really thought about the precious metals side as well, you know, the gold. It's something we need to bear in mind. So thank you so much, ladies, for your time today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm hoping that, again, as Maureen and Katharine have said, you know, it'd be good to keep these collaborations going. So let's get this this talk out there for the first week of Fairtrade Fortnight. And obviously, if people want to get in contact with you, we will put the contact details on the video as well. And thank you so much for your time. We've learned so much about Fairtrade Fortnight, and hopefully fair trade every day, 365 days of the year.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. theme for this year's Fairtrade Fortnight, which starts from the 22nd of February through to the 7th of March, is Choose the World You Want. Basically, our choices are powerful. Their effects can reach far beyond us. They can help us shape the world we want. The daily decisions you make about what you eat, drink, and wear affects the lives of people around the world and the health of our planet. So this Fairtrade Fortnight, we're focusing on the choices we all make every day. At Co-op, our principles are more valuable than profits. We care about the world that we share and are passionate about treating people fairly and doing our bit to protect the planet. The Co-op are proud to have been leaders in fair trade for more than 25 years. We're the UK's largest convenience seller of fair trade products and have delivered many fair trade firsts over the years, right from being the first retailer to stock fair trade products in all our stores back in 1998. 100% of our tea, coffee, bananas, cocoa, bagged sugars, and African roses are fair trade, and we're the largest seller of fair trade wine in the world. All the cocoa used as an ingredient in our own brand Co-op product is sourced on fair trade terms, and where bananas, tea, and coffee are used as an ingredient, we also make sure fair trade producers benefit. Our long-standing commitment goes beyond having fair trade products in our stores. It means campaigning for and championing a better way of doing business. We firmly believe that fair trade is the gold standard for certification, but it's more than that. It's a movement for trade justice. Our support for fair trade is more important now than ever, and we need your help. We need to come together and use your voice to champion fair trade and change lives through the choices we each make. And at Co-op, we believe that fair trade is the gold standard because only fair trade pays producers fairly. The fair trade minimum pricing means that farmers and producers get a fair price despite changes in the market. Secondly, it gives producers a say in their future. The fair trade premium provides additional funds to producers who choose how to invest it in projects that benefit their communities. Thirdly, it does the right thing by both people and the planet. Fair trade tackles the impact of climate change on producers and more widely through adaptation, mitigation, and reforestation projects. And finally, it strengthens communities all around the world through empowering producers to have a voice in investing in their communities. Communities are strengthened and brought together. So fair trade is more than a mark on a pack, it's a movement. Through the fair trade standards, minimum price, premium producer voice that puts producers at the heart of decision making and campaigners, it delivers a unique proposition. Fair trade producers that Co-op work with will not only receive a guaranteed minimum price for their goods, offering a safety net against low market prices, but they also receive an extra sum of money, a fair trade premium, that they invest in community projects of their choice, like schools, clinics, and climate change adaptation. And the fair trade mark on our Co-op goods also reassures shoppers that the product has been farmed in a way that helps to protect the environment and local biodiversity. The Fairtrade Foundation is shining a spotlight on climate change during this year's Fairtrade Fortnight because of the huge opportunity that 2020 presents, with the UK hosting the UN climate talks in Glasgow later this year, COP26.